Hi, it's Dr. Jenn Kennedy. I'm a sexologist and couples therapist. The Pleasure Project podcast is about sex and relationships. So, this includes discussions on desire, dysfunction, dissatisfaction, exploration of all things sex related. So, sometimes I'll do toy reviews and we'll look at trends, and sometimes I'll also enlist other experts. We'll increase your insight and enhance your pleasure. So, tune in. In this episode, I talk about touch and touch starvation, which is something I'm seeing more and more. And it doesn't matter if you're single or if you're in a relationship, that I find that people can be touch starved either way. So we're going to unpack that, and I hope you tune in. Hi, welcome back. So today I'm going to be talking about the need for touch, and specifically how many of the folks that I see are touch starved. And that's not even just the folks that are out of a relationship. Those folks sometimes are in a relationship and still not getting their touch needs met. Because as a sex therapist, many of the people I see are actually in a relationship but feeling very, very distant. It's interesting that as humans, we have this basic need for touch, like not only just physical touch, but of course, emotional connection. And we might have proximity, like we might be in relationship with others, and yet we aren't getting actual connection happening. And so I just want to unpack this a little bit because it's complicated. And I see an epidemic of loneliness happening for people of all ages, but specifically the clients I tend to see, for the most part, are about 45 or 50 plus. So most of my clients, I would say, are about 45 to 70-ish. And in that population, there is a lot of loneliness. And so you might have people in your life and still feel very lonely. So let's talk about it. Specifically, what is, like, how do we know this is happening? Well, it's like in relationship, people say sometimes shorthand that they want more sex. And I'm a sex therapist, right? So they come in through that door of I want more sex. But when we actually start to unpack that and understand what do they really want, it's not about frequency. It's not actually that they want more sex. Oftentimes it's that they want more attention, or what they really want is touch. It's kind of primary. And we find that when they get those needs met, when we understand what that actual function is, the function is attention, the function is physical touch. When that can be met, then they're much happier people. So I see this both with men and women. Oftentimes with women, they have touch needs met through being parents. You know, they have a lot more contact with animals or with children or with, as caregivers, they're just touching more beings in the world. Men, not so much, but men want touch very much. And so men come in through the clinical door of asking for sex, when really I think what they want is touch. Women come in through wanting more companionship and connection. That's sort of the coded language they will use. But also they really want connection as well without necessarily making it be about sex. So sometimes we have to actually tease it apart a little bit and understand better, what are you really seeking? What is it in this configuration that you think you want versus what you actually are seeking? Because oftentimes it's not what it appears. And so, because when you actually break down what is in sex for you, it's not really what they want. Most of the time sex is over within a couple minutes, and maybe it's about sex, but it's typically not. Even sex is about the lead up, or it's about the afterglow that people are really seeking, right? It's the closeness, it's the rush of hormones that they get, it's the bonding afterwards, or it's the anticipation that leads up to it. That's actually mostly what they're craving. So when people say they really want sex, it's not just about that. It's about, do I matter? It's about the attention. It's about the closeness. It's about the relational benefits they get post-sex. There's typically other things that they are seeking. And touch is a huge, huge part of that. And so I'm always listening for sort of what is missing in their lives and what do they actually need in this configuration. And so if they are in a relationship that doesn't have a lot of touch, or if they're not in a relationship at all and they're probably touch starved, that might be a place to start, right? Are they not getting any sort of interaction with anyone in the day-to-day, or weeks at a time. Like I've had several people who are single say, it's been weeks since I've touched another person. When they come in contact with somebody and they give them a hug for some reason, that was so meaningful to them. That made them pause. That made them recognize how long it's been since they've actually had contact. That struck me. What an impact that made on them. And so when those people go see a physical doctor or like a PT person or a massage therapist, for example, how that barrier gets broken and their physical body gets touched and how they get attended to and how that strikes them in a way that tells them that they haven't been attended to and how that matters. And that certainly happens to us as a society, I would say, as we get older. So noticing, like, what are we seeking here and what are we not having in our lives, and what's coming up. Sometimes there's a craving. Sometimes there's like an irritability or an anxiety or a sadness that is hard to pinpoint, right? It's not like you can exactly hang your hat on it, that it's like it's attributable to missing touch, but it might sort of feel like it starts to go there. But this is part of your nervous system saying, I miss contact. If you've had it, you miss it. And most people have had it because as a child, you had some contact with primary caregivers, hopefully. And so as you've become an adult, you've had some expectancy that there would be some contact with another. So especially if you've got someone in your world in proximity, like you've got a partner, but there isn't contact happening, then it's like they're there, but they're not, right? They're maybe sleeping next to you, but you don't have access to them. That's hard. That's even harder than there's no one there, right? Because there's a loneliness when you can't actually make contact with the person that you would expect that you could. And so it's sort of an existential layering on the loneliness that can really make things hard for us. And so just sort of noticing the nervous system reacting to the bodily, like missing and wanting touch. It's super normal. It's super natural to have that desire. The other thing I will say is that women, and maybe this is skewed a little bit younger than the age range that I mentioned earlier, women who are still raising kids tend to be kind of touched out in a different way, right? Because they're picking up kids and they're moving kids around, and they're certainly, when they're still breastfeeding, all that kind of thing, they have a lot of contact, but it's not the same intimate contact that they need. Like they're not getting held. The women aren't getting held. They are caregiving to other. So they're having a lot of contact, but it's not the quality of contact where they are being nurtured. And so they might actually be rejecting of contact with their partner, but at the end of the day, they don't actually feel held either. And so it's a tricky balance of I feel touched out, and I also don't feel satisfied or held in the way I need. And so it's a complicated balance, because their partners are oftentimes craving and sort of trying to get access to them physically and emotionally. And she is saying, I can't give anymore. I can't negotiate my bodily needs and capabilities. And so, I have to say no to everything because I can't figure this out. And so just no. And I see that a lot too with therapy and people that are coming in for sex therapy, is that because they can't negotiate and they can't figure out an in between, they basically shut it all down. And that's a really hard place to be, because no touch is really hard. And yet the in between, a lot of times I hear this echoed in women, specifically is in heterosexual relationships, is that they're afraid that if they give some contact, like a hug or a holding, or that it's going to then lead to more, and they're not prepared to give more. They're not prepared for it to lead to sex. So they basically cut it off. They cut off everything. And so they don't get their touch needs met. Nobody gets their touch needs met. Both parties are feeling pretty lonely. And so it's this thing of like, well, if I can't carry through the whole thing, then I'm not going to do anything. And so both people are feeling pretty disappointed in the exchange. And so sometimes we have to walk it back and say, okay, let's take sex off the table. Let's take it off the table for now, right? Let's just understand that at this point, touch is just touch, and it's for touch's sake, and it's for connection. And I usually find that both parties feel some relief in that, because at least there's some connection being had. There's some touch being had, and that calms both people's nervous system, and it starts to reintegrate the coupleship. And it feels good to at least have that happen. So let's take a quick break and we'll be right back. Hey there, do you like what you're hearing? And do you feel like you're ready for more? Then head on over to pleasureproject.us. There you will find the Pleasure Circle. That is where you get to work with me one-on-one. If you want to do a live group, that is where it's offered. I have a 6-week curriculum that is an intensive, and it brings all of this material together. If you like what you hear week by week, that is where it happens and where it gets facilitated. So join one of my groups. I do them several times a year. You can jump in on one of those. They're done via Zoom, so it doesn't matter where you're based. And also there is now a self-guided version. So if you're not into groups, or if the timing doesn't work, you can also do the self-guided version, and that's okay too. So you're going to head to pleasureproject.us. You can also find past podcasts there. You can also find merchandise. So head on over to pleasureproject.us. And thanks for listening. Okay, so welcome back. So kind of tuning back into touch and why we don't talk about it. And I think that is because, as I was talking about before the break, that touch often gets confused with sex. And it's not the same, right? You can have intimacy without sex. And I know people are like, wait, what? I feel like those two terms get conflated, and not one and the same, right? You can have intimacy being closeness, being meaningful conversations, meaning holding, meaning feeling very, very close and connected to a partner without it being sexual, without it being actual intercourse. And that can feel extremely satisfying. There's plenty of relationships, certainly long-term relationships, where the couples are quite intimate without being sexual. And that sometimes becomes the preference, in fact, as our bodies change, as our, maybe we have pain, chronic pain, or fatigue, or other aches and pains and problems and such. But I think that intimacy becomes more of the priority, and closeness becomes more of the priority, and touch is always the priority. So part of what I want to look at is that non-sexual touch can be a way back together. So sometimes for couples that can be holding hands, that can be a hand on the back, as someone is walking through a door, or as you're watching TV, just, a hand on the arm kind of thing. It's that connection, right? As you're having dinner, reaching across the table and touching the other person's hand, right? It's eye contact. It's all those little moments of connection. It's putting your phone down and not having that fractured attention, which is so prevalent right now, right? We're so fractured in our attention, and it's happening like across the board. Everybody's doing it, because it's so inviting to look at the phone or at the TV, or to do a million things, but to actually just be present with our partner. And it doesn't have to be all the time, but just some of the time, so that they feel like, hey, I'm attending to you for this period of time, which tells you that you matter to me, right? That starts to really change the relationship. And then also touch breaks that barrier, that physical barrier, touch of some sort. Right? It could be your foot wanders over to their foot under the covers. It could be, just when you reunite, when you come back home, there's a hug, or there's some sort of embrace, right? It's not overtly sexual, but it's a meaningful reconnection. There's something in that, right? That says, hey, we're in this together, and you matter to me. And it's not just that perfunctory quick kiss, it's something that is a punctuation. I think it makes a difference. And I know that it speaks to the nervous system. It calms, right? The Gottmans talk about the 6-second kiss, or I think any of those things matter, and they do help. So couples that do this with some regularity, they put goodwill into the bank account. And I find that then when they do have conflict, it's like they've got some reserves built up, because they've done all this effort at attending to one another, at mirroring one another. And so when they have conflict, it's like there's already been established some rapport and some caring. And so they can pull from that, and it doesn't escalate quite so much. Same thing goes for touch. The touch is nonverbal, right? I mean, it's this thing that is a signaling, much like eye contact is, where someone's talking to you and you're looking at your phone. It's this signaling of like, you kind of don't matter. Whereas if you're paying focused attention, you do matter. And that counts for a lot. Same thing, quality of touch matters, right? It's the difference between a grab and a soft touch. Like, it communicates a lot. And that goes into our psyche. It tells us about how we trust somebody. It tells us about our level of patience, our level of interest, our ability to care. It's interesting because as a sex therapist, very rarely do I actually have conversations about the actual mechanics of sex. However, when I talk to people, oftentimes I'll split couples up and I'll talk to them about the quality of sex. And I will definitely get feedback that sometimes partners are not super satisfied with the quality of sex, like the actual touch, but they don't say that a lot to one another. And yet that isn't the biggest complaint. So there is room for that. Like how he touches her does factor in, and there is room to work on that in that feedback loop. And yet so much more, it's how he treats her. It's how he talks to her. It's how and when he interacts with her that she cares more about. So, but touch matters, it matters tremendously, and it communicates a lot to us. So if it isn't happening, if you are touch starved in a relationship, I think there's a way back in with really light interaction, right? Starting to have that non-sexual touch as a beginning, and that low pressure interaction that you could just, like I said, just hand on the arm or hand on the back, or just sort of starting to, and people notice. It's just like if you use somebody's name in a sentence, they're like, what? They perk up. Same thing. If you touch their arm in conversation, it's like you're breaking a barrier and they notice. There is something in that people start to, your partner will start to notice. Now, if you're not in a partnership and you're by yourself, there's still ways to access touch, right? I would say start with just like, can you put lotion on your body, right? Can you reclaim yourself? Can you take, if you like showers or baths, can you enjoy that process? And maybe you buy yourself some really nice like scrubs and kind of your skin as a starting place, and then lotions, right? Can you give yourself some love first? Are you interested in maybe going to a really good massage therapist? Because that touch can be really magical. And having that piece of it, are there friends that you would feel comfortable hugging? Is that something that's possible? Just to start to have some safe, comfortable touch in your life, because I do feel like that is something that, can make you feel more connected to the world, make you feel, more like loved, deserving, grounded, all of that. It's part of like us. I don't know, this is getting a little woo, but it's true. Like, it's just, and I know this is the way out of this polarization and sort of loneliness that we feel kind of on a larger scale. And it's like, when you feel more deserving of self, and then when you feel more connected, it helps your psyche. It helps you, and it helps you feel better overall. I've just seen it. I've seen it play out with clients over and over again. And I know it happens. So I want to just validate that need for touch, because I think it's legitimate. And if you're not in a partnership, or if you're in a partnership where that doesn't feel particularly available, like, can you open up that conversation? Can you find a way to make it feasible, either with that person or with yourself? I'm always certainly an advocate of self-pleasure too. I think that's definitely a way in. I think that's a part of self-care. It is also Masturbation Month, by the way. So I'm a big fan of that being a part of self-touch and self-pleasure. But how else might you kind of reclaim your body and your needs? Because I feel like this mind-body connection sometimes gets missed. And we spend a lot of time in our head and not a lot of time attending to ourselves. And I think it's important. I think it all goes together. So dropping back into yourself, dropping back into your body, and then if it's available, dropping back into touch with other and what feels approachable and manageable. And so I'm curious to know, how does this land? What feels reasonable to reignite in your partnership? Give me some feedback. I welcome that. So hope this was helpful, and I look forward to hearing from you. Hey, it's Dr. Jenn. Thanks so much for tuning in. Please leave us a review and leave a comment if something struck you. We love to get the feedback. It really helps the podcast. And if you want to reach me, go ahead and direct message me on Instagram, or you can reach me at jen@rivieratherapy.com. Thanks.